See Brown in your face.
Have you heard of Everything at Once?
Do you know about Everything at Once?
It's internationally known.
Aliens listen to it.
It's the best ever.
If there's something you're looking for in the 814, or feeling a little bored and think there ain't no more, check out Everything at Once and allow it to be your source. It's that raw podcast that's always showing support, highlighting the scene. No need to take I-90 to Peep or 79 to see how it be. Interviewing your locals with mindsets that are global. Innovators and creators on every single upload. So much going on in the EPA.
Incredible content.
Everything at Once will keep you up to date.
Amazing guests.
What you doing? Come through and hang with Tony and Dave.
Community driven.
Bringing everything at once from around the way. Everything at once from around the way. Hey.
Please listen. We love you. Everything at Once.
Everything at Once.
Hey, Dave, you ready for another podcast?
Yeah, I guess.
Dang, man, you sure you feeling okay?
I don't know. I've just been tired and sluggish lately, and I just can't seem to get any energy.
You really should have seen our last guest, Shantae. When she was here, she could have given you some direction. She's a board-certified doctor of natural medicine.
Do you think it's too late?
Nah, man, you could give her a call. Her practice is called Sacred Divine Femininity.
Sounds like that's for girls.
It's not, man. She treats guys and girls. She takes a holistic approach towards health and well-being.
You know, I think I'm going to give her a call.
That's a good idea, dude.
Hey, Tony, what's up, bud?
Wow, Dave, you're looking a lot better.
I'm feeling a lot better. Thank you so much for getting me in contact with Shantae.
Yeah, Sacred Divine Femininity really seems like it did the trick for you.
It really did. I'm ready to do the best podcast ever.
Let's do it.
Yeah!
It's time to introduce this show.
The best show on the face of the planet.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you all for tuning in today. We want to thank our Patreon producers, Brian G., Josh W., Ian D., Nick G., and Sadie M.
Patreon, it's an awesome way to support the show and say thanks. You can become a Patreon supporter by clicking the link below and choosing to be an intern, assistant, or producer level supporter.
If being on the production team is too much pressure for you, you can also send any contributions using our Venmo at Everything at Once Studios. We now want to thank all the local businesses who supported this episode. These businesses get the Everything at Once stamp of approval and are critical members of the Everything at Once community. We couldn't do it without them. With winter approaching, are there any last-minute details that you want to change or renovate around your home?
I might, but you know who to call.
Yeah! Ghostbusters!
No, Tony. No, not Ghostbusters. Solid State Construction.
Oh, yeah. Solid State.
Yeah.
Duh. Solid State takes pride in all their home remodeling projects. Solid State specializes in bathroom remodeling, kitchen renovation, window and door installation, custom design work, and more, including painting, flooring, drywall, sidewalk, decks. Get your free quote today by calling Nick at 814-397-7854. Solid people, solid product, Solid State Construction.
You know, Tony, with all these renovations from Solid State, I think we might have kicked up some bad energy around here. Yeah, oh yeah. Luckily, we know just the people to go see.
I know it this time. It's Ghostbusters.
No, Tony! Our friends at Cauldron and Thorne!
Wow. I feel really dumb right now, and I can't believe I didn't think of Cauldron and Thorne, the world's largest witchcraft and metaphysical shop, with everything a person needs to channel the spirit world.
Practice some self-care.
Find enlightenment.
Curse your enemies.
Protect yourself from your enemies.
Bless your friends.
Cleanse your space from negative energies. You can check out all the magical wares available at for these different practices we all love and enjoy at Cauldron and Thorne, 2724 West 8th Street, or online at cauldronandthorne.com.
This week, we have an incredible guest for you.
We're not started yet, Dave. Now we're started.
Hello.
Hello.
I need some snare in my headphones.
Let me get you. I got lots of knobs for you. Rock, welcome back. We were just talking about before I actually came on the air, but I wanted this to be on the show about the hypothetical prospect of $6 billion being spent in our city. And I think as a county councilman, you, of all people, are probably the most of anybody that I actually know qualified to say how much of an effect that would actually have on our city. Or our county, because you're county council, so that's like our whole area.
It'd be mind-boggling. I mean, right now we're talking about how to spend $11 million left over of ARPA, and you start thinking, and like, imagine walking into a grocery store with a couple grand, and what's the first thing you're gonna What's the first thing you're gonna take care of? That would just be insane. I mean, the last 5 years or so, I've seen $300 million of investment, and look at what it's done to downtown.
Right.
$6 billion. We could make sure that there's not a hungry kid and not a single person that's house poor.
Huge school upgrades.
It would just
education upgrades.
Mind-boggling change.
It would be crazy. $6 billion is a lot of money. $11 million sounds like a lot of money, I feel like. But I feel like when you're talking on a government level, it's not a whole lot. You kind of got to be careful with that $11 million. It'll be gone like nothing.
That's kind of the issue at the county, and we got $600 million budget roughly, and there's maybe $10 million maybe that's a little bit discretionary, and even then, like, it's to keep alive the departments that you have, and just where are you going to
most of it goes to like salaries and paying people and making sure that all the different things that a city needs to be functional as a government, those people need paid and stuff like that. And my understanding is a lot of money goes there.
Huge amount.
I've been through my my job that I do. We were looking at like prices of different construction projects, and to put like a bridge over some railroad tracks was estimated out to almost $2 million, and that wasn't even a bridge that cars could go over.
Yeah, that sounds relatively cheap for a bridge.
Right, yeah. It's not even a car bridge, but like without a doubt, that money can go to those kinds of projects so easily and just disappear. I mean, I imagine I live nearby the like Erie High, and I see all the construction and all the work that's going on there, and I can only imagine that like the field and the stuff that they're doing there is easily probably close to like $5-6 million.
Yeah, I'm not sure specific on that project.
Right.
Just 12 buses for the school district was $4.1 million.
Jesus,
Wow.
yeah.
That's a lot of money.
Yeah. I mean, they're high-end tech EV buses with chargers and all this stuff. So,
Oh, they're fully electric?
Yeah, they're getting 12 new electric buses. We were just there to announce we were doing a press conference for the Infrastructure and Inflation Reduction Acts, because these are like nebulous concepts. People are like, well, how does all that money getting spent affect us, you know? And so we were doing a press conference to highlight, and we're like, here it is. And it's funny because on Facebook, everybody's like, oh, you know, my taxes are going up and they're buying school buses. Like, no, they got all of those buses for free.
Right.
And then they're going to get solar on the roof and sell the power off the roof to local industrial companies and actually make a profit. And then when the power goes out, and like let's say there's a natural disaster and it's a warming center, all those buses are going to backfeed into the school for emergency power.
Oh, wow, that's
that's
cool.
really
So they're
neat.
like giant batteries almost.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
Sweet.
Charge during off-peak hours and sell the power from the solar cells during peak and actually have a revenue stream.
Right. Solar is super expensive too. I was going through a small crisis the other day. I think you talked about this on Facebook or commented on this about me going through a small like internal crisis about having to buy an electric vehicle and having to power it and needing solar panels on my house in order to power my new electric car that I'm going to need in like 5 to 10 years once they stop making ice engines, stop producing ice engines. And the quote I got was for $13,000, and that's just for like the kit for me to install and put it all together pretty much myself, and then have like an electrician come in and flip the final switch and call Penelec and say, hey, he's on the grid or whatever he has to do. So that's like just for raw materials, basically.
Sure. But as things progress, there are and will be, you deal with grants all the time and know that the kind of stuff that
yeah, they want to help that along, and I'm sure there will be money
and I think
from the
that's going to
federal
make it a lot more palatable, because it is true. Like, I know my house, I would need all new electrical if I was going to put solar on the roof, and like I was looking at, or if I got an electric car charger,
Right.
I don't have any room in the box, and it's a pretty old electrical box, and I would need a significant upgrade just for my house. So
Right.
But I think as the incentives, like there's already
There's a
tax
pretty
credit.
nice tax credit. Yeah, I think I was looking at this the other day because a buddy of mine bought two. Actually, our sponsor, Solid State Construction, got two new electric Econoline vans, and I was helping him do some research as to whether or not there was money available for him, because we were sure there's money available for him. It was just a matter of finding it and figuring out how to get access to it. And it's $7,500 per electric vehicle for anybody making less than $300,000 a year, which is pretty nice.
It's a pretty good deal.
Pretty good deal. And I think there was a small state credit too, but I think that was like 1%. And I think it was pretty tight on your income levels as to like how much you could actually make in order to get the state income credit, which is a little bit of a bummer, but I'm sure.
Now, that's an end of the year tax credit when you're filing your taxes, so a lot of people have to have that money up front to even.
Yeah.
That's the challenge, is people that are making $28,000 a year are not able to afford
buy
the solar
an electric vehicle or
a
any of
tax
that stuff,
credit at the
yeah.
end of the year. What are you talking about?
Right.
Yeah.
It makes it hard. But it's really cool that that's happening to all the buses around here, and that Erie is making progressive steps. I see more solar panels pop up around here. When I was in Texas and California, it seemed like probably at least a third of all the houses had solar panels out there.
And we're getting a lot of utility scale solar nearby too. We just worked on an
In
ordinance
Venango?
Venango. There's another one in Union City that's going to be maybe a year out.
And not Washington Township, Conneaut Township too is in talks with getting more solars out there, or putting together an ordinance, I think.
Was it Washington Township? One of the townships, maybe it was McCain. They actually zoned a particular area.
Yeah.
Like, this is the area where we're going to have solar,
Right.
Utility scale
I know
solar.
Conneaut Township did something very similar to
Yeah.
Albion. Did something very similar because the solar people apparently want to buy land and put solar panels out here, put solar panels all over the place wherever there's space for them.
Anywhere that they're going to be allowed, they would like to have them. Yeah, for
Right.
sure. And it was pretty interesting working on the solar ordinance, because there's 12 municipalities in Erie County that just don't have any rules. And Jess Horan did a fabulous job working on that ordinance. And it was pretty cool going through with the industry people, some of the environmentalists. What do you guys think of this? And the back and forth. And it was a pretty interesting process. But we were getting ready because it's coming. There's going to be a lot of that in the near future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's interesting things going on out in the county as far as electric goes. So last time you were here, you were running for city council.
What a year it's been.
Yeah, a little bit over a year, because it was springtime,
Yeah.
I think, last year.
Yeah, I think that was probably May.
Yeah, sounds about right.
Probably
April, May.
Right before the primary.
Right.
Yeah, last year was a whirlwind.
Yeah, and now here you are on county council. Do you think that's an upgrade from city council, or would you rather have been on city council if you were able to choose which one you wanted to do?
I'm really thankful for the opportunity to serve more than anything. I got a nice little dose of humility in the city council race. I got my ass handed to me pretty good. Finished 8 out of 9, but I worked my ass off.
It was good. I voted for you.
I
did.
appreciate that.
It wasn't bad. 8 out of 9. You still had
I beat one guy.
a fair amount of votes, comparatively speaking. Nobody really blew you out of the water, because I remember looking at the actual things, and you were only off by 1,000, 2,000 votes.
Yeah, it's about how that goes. Yeah, and then it just happened that I had worked really hard, and one of the people that I had worked really hard to gain the support was Mary Rennie. who was the county council person for our district. And I must have done something right, because when she was talking about resigning, she brought me in and says, I'd like you to think about running for this. And my first inclination was, no way.
No chance.
I just put my family through hell. You know, if I was gone almost every day out knocking doors, doing something. And my girlfriend was like, no, we can't.
Not again.
We can't run 2 races in 1 year. And I'm like, well, yeah, maybe not. And then I saw some of the people that were kind of jockeying for position and was like, hold on a second. You know, if I want to have somebody in there that I trust that's going to be a really good voice for Erie County, not just be a pushover and just vote with the administration all the time, but really be objective about things. And so we had a conversation with the family, and I said, all right, I guess we're in. And then I kind of put my name in, and the party nominated me because she had vacated the ballot. And after a primary at the ballot, we just saw this in the presidential race, right? After the primary is essentially over, if somebody dies, leaves office, whatever, then the party has to nominate somebody to be in that role. And so they chose me, and was glad for it, because it's been really invigorating work. Mostly it's fun.
Mostly it's fun. There have been a few big things that I think caught a lot of attention in Erie since you've been on county council. The first one is the library, which I don't think that county council really had a whole lot, like, at least what it sounded like to me was that county council didn't particularly have a lot of say or involvement in that.
So the lease agreement and the plan there was formulated by the administration, and in the year prior to me taking office, they had passed a resolution approving the lease. It's all that's required. It's just an up and down vote.
Resolution,
one read, versus like an ordinance, we would do 2 reads. So that's 2 separate meetings, so the people see it on the agenda and can come and talk about it. And so a lot of people were just kind of taken by surprise out of nowhere. Hey,
this has happened.
This is getting leased, and then people organized around it. It was very empathetic to all the people that were disturbed by this plan, distrustful, I think, more than anything. And so we did what we could. We had a vote to try to rescind that lease, but that was only a 4-3 vote. And when that gets vetoed, we have to try to do a veto override, and we just didn't get over that hump of having 5 votes, which is kind of soul crushing. You think, oh, we have a majority of council, and we'll be able to fight the good fight, but sometimes you need that 5th vote, and it's really challenging.
Right. That's one of the things that I noticed between county council and city council, at least from an outsider's perspective, is that everybody in city council kind of seems to be very much on the same page or in agreement with one another, whereas county council seems a little bit more divided.
I think that's a issue by issue basis. I mean, one of the big topics right now down at city council is whether or not they're going to outlaw
open containers
in town.
On State Street.
And that's
well,
creating
not just
some,
State Street, it's all of the city.
the whole city. And actually, that's the one reason why this ordinance that they're talking about right now has more legs, because before, when they tried to do this, they said not in Perry Square, not in Frontier, and people felt like that was intentionally trying to push certain groups out, right? And so now this is a citywide ban, and that's kind of why it has a little more legs, because how can you claim to be discriminating if you're willing to arrest a father walking the dog with a beer, you know, or ticket, whatever the case may be.
They had a very lively
It was very contentious
meeting yesterday. Yeah, I watched that.
Yeah, and you see, there's strong opinions on any legislative body. They had some contention around the bike lane on Green Garden.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And, back and forth. I would say we have the Democratic majority of council works together really well. And for the most part, there's a good collegiality between members of opposite parties. Like one of my
nice.
favorite individuals to talk to, I disagree with vehemently, but like I love talking to Charlie Bale because he's kind of quiet, and I'll be like, "Hey, Charlie, what are you thinking about this?" And he always has something interesting to say, and sometimes it's just fun to debate him a little bit. But,
that's part of the whole.
the contention
politics.
at county council is more with the administration.
Yeah.
And council is where the fight is.
Do you think he's going to be around for another 4 years?
It's a good question. It is
Shaking your magic 8-ball rock.
Never make a prediction because you're always you can be
Yeah,
found
right.
wrong. I would be very surprised if he was able to have a successful re-election campaign. Between people of both parties out in Fairview that have been very upset with the way that the proposed industrial park was handled.
Yeah, those farmers were not happy about that. Fairview and Girard were not happy about that.
And we had the pride display at the library, some cuts at the library, the lease at the library, and there are people that I talk to all over the county, and it's kind of surprising how many are coming to me just with like their critique and their criticism, and it's like, oh, I didn't expect that. I thought you would be on board, and you're. But who knows? I'm excited for the prospect of a pretty good candidate coming up next year to challenge that.
Has
really
anybody
hopeful
gone
for.
public yet?
Not at this time. There's been a couple names getting
I've heard a
whispered
couple
around.
names too. Yeah.
But no one is officially in yet. At that point, you'd have to have a PAC and everything all set up, and
Sure.
it's a process to be ready to actually announce and be ready to fundraise.
Yeah, it's still a ways away.
Yeah, and I think there's so many big races this year that
One at a time.
Yeah, well, we were talking about trying to fundraise for our own PACs, and I was like, I feel weird asking anyone for a dime. I'm like, give to Jim Wirtz, give to Kamala. I mean, like, there's great statewide races that are really deserving of people's time and resources, and so it's kind of one of those things where it's probably a little better to sit back and
wait,
let that
give it a little time,
right?
It'll be
to get its own
interesting to
momentum.
see how that all shakes out. It feels like we're potentially at a turning point with the way that politics have been handled over the last 8 to 10 years. Maybe moving in a different direction away from what I like to call bully politics, as compared to just being more collegial with people.
It's crazy. I watched the debate this year. I know you went to the debate party, and I watched the whole debate. I thought it was probably the best debate that I've seen in a number of years between both parties, and it still really bothered me. I watched some clips from old debates from Bill Clinton, George Bush and John Kerry and Al Gore and
Striking, isn't
JFK and Ronald Reagan and all the Richard Nixon and all the old politicians and their debates compared to the debates we have now is mind-boggling. How did we get this far away from anything that is actually important, and having two individuals that looked like they could at least respect each other? You know what I mean? I feel like that was one of the big themes from candidates in the past was yeah, I like this person, I respect them, I think they're a great person, but we disagree on a few things, and here's what we disagree on, not this like Dave described it, bully politics is a good word for it.
Yeah. I went back and watched Romney and Obama, and it was striking that they would say quite a few nice things about one another.
Right.
I think he's an honorable man, and we just disagree on our positions. I maybe didn't always agree with John McCain's politics, but I thought he was a really honorable man. And there was some comments that he responded to where I think it was an older lady saying, "No, he's a Muslim," and he's like, "No, ma'am," and there's nothing wrong if he was, but he's not. And
Yeah.
and
Going to bat for each other a little bit.
yeah. But also, I just a little bit of pushback in the age of Trump. If you're not pushing back and you're not fighting back, I guess like I run into this at the county where I tend to have a more optimistic point of view to say, let's have compromise. Let's reach across the aisle and build consensus among all of us. And frankly, it's not been possible. There's some internal things that just last night I was stomping around pretty hard around my living room, just steaming because of somebody's uncompromising character. And how do you deal with that? How do you approach somebody who, like, and this is just my perspective on Trump, but he is foul, contentious, willing to lie, pretty constant. And I know that there's some tendencies of a lot of politicians to stretch
the truth,
a little bit,
misconstrue things.
But I mean, when we're talking about animals getting eaten in the community, and
the
leaders of that community saying, "Hey, no," like
quite a sound bite right there.
Yeah,
for sure.
like what do you do with that? And I think that a lot of people are genuinely fearful. I know I am. When Biden was the candidate, I thought very deeply of what it meant to be a Democrat on the Board of Elections in one of the most important counties in one of the most important states. And that if there are threats or violence, or let's say Trump wins and he fulfills his promise of rooting out the communists and radical left, like, who did he mean by that? I think he mostly meant Democrats.
Yeah, just generally progressive
right?
people.
Yeah, so like I figured if there's a list, I'm not very high up on that list. I'm way down on the bottom of that list in terms of priority of people to go after. But I figured I'm probably on it. My girlfriend and I were having a lot of conversations about what does the security of our family look like. If we needed to get out of town real quick, what's an arrangement that we needed to have with our co-parents, and what does that look like? And thankfully, with Harris as the nominee, those fears have subsided a little bit, but they're still there.
Right.
Well, that's why I think that this is such a pivotal moment, because people, us included, I'll include myself, I won't talk for the two of you, but like people are susceptible to groupthink, and people, whether they like to admit it or not, or whether they like to, say they're an independent free thinker or not, a lot of times they follow the what's set out by their leaders, right? So like things have changed, I feel like, so much in the last decade because of how the leader treats things, so like if there's not a change, then this progresses further. This becomes more systemic and it becomes more of an issue. And like I've always been registered independent. Like I go to the ballot box and I vote for whoever I feel best about with the information given. So it's not like I'm biased one way or the other, but it just bothers me, like the attacking on both sides, because the roots grow deeper the further that it goes along.
Yeah, I think I'm listening to an audiobook by Ezra Klein. It's called Why We're So Polarized. And it's a really interesting book that talks a lot about human nature of group identity. And like they were talking about some studies with some young kids where they were trying to divide the room based on whether they picked a number higher than 12 or lower than 12, because that was going to be the control of this project to see at what level did you identify with the group and favor your group over the other. And even in the control, where it was supposed to be something completely arbitrary, when they give the kids money and say, okay, you can give your money to other people in this room, you pick who you're going to give it to, and they overwhelmingly gave it to people in their own group.
Right.
So like even in the control, they were like, holy crap, we can't even test at this point in which your identity lashes into your thinking. But
we're such inherently, incredibly, strongly social people. Like the group
human
was
nature.
Part of survival since human beings came into existence.
100%.
You know?
And I think the difference is it used to be that when we wear different hats in society, I'm a father, I'm a spouse, I'm involved in my church, I'm involved in a bowling league. And when we're in different social situations, we've been able to identify with other people, with your coworkers, and say, I'm a coworker in this context first. I'm a father in this context first. That the people's political identity is skyrocketing in terms of importance in their life and to how they view themselves and their identity
and how they view other people.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
I think it's because people are going more inwards towards like even when you see people out in public, like they're doing something social, they're on their phones. You know, they're getting fed an algorithm. I think it's so important for people socially to, for lack of better words, diversify their portfolio. You know, like when you're taking like what you're saving, you want to put it in different things, you know, to get as much wealth as possible. I feel like that's the same for
Diversify
us.
your thinking.
Exactly. So like
social groups,
you work, family, you're in a bowling league, and you're meeting all these different people in all these different places. And the more people that you meet that are different from you, and you widen and diversify your social portfolio, the less you're scared by like people that aren't just like you. You have a little bit of everything, but you just have more people. Like even when they're going out and doing social things, they're not interacting with other people. They're this, and what's on this is what's getting fed to them that they like based off of algorithms.
But I think too, the division is intentional and calculated. You know, there's a whole legal Haitian population. Legal. They came here by the rules, right? That was the whole thing. We don't hate people that did it legally. We just want illegals to not be here. Well, that turned out to be not quite accurate.
Right.
Because people that are here legally with work permits that are fulfilling a job role where there was no other people in that community. There weren't enough people in the community to staff a factory. And so there was a bunch of immigrants that came in to work in a community that was largely left alone, and then all of a sudden was thrust in the national spotlight overnight. I agree with the thought process there that we should have diversity and we should be able to see the humanity in others, and that, like, especially as an elected person, I need to understand that I represent their interests too, and I need to understand what those interests are. That's important. But like, I think when there are people that are quite frankly dangerous in their rhetoric, and I would put Trump in that category, J.D. Vance in that category, that it's got to be fought against vigorously. And so while I could say I'm more than happy to have a good relationship with a family member of that's in a different politically, because I can find that identity with them as family.
Yeah.
But it's real hard for me to both sides it. You know, I can acknowledge that Kamala is painting Donald as a liar, as somebody that's a dangerous individual, and maybe it's my partisan leaning, but I tend to agree with her. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know how to square that. Like, should the other party or candidate be nice and calm? You know what I mean? Like, it's,
or do you fight fire with fire? It's interesting too, because I would agree with you in that some of Trump and Vance's rhetoric is dangerous to many different types of people across our country. The part that I really have a difficult time coming to grasp with is that why is somebody that's saying these things that are dangerous actually dangerous? Why is this not just not an issue or disregarded when somebody's talking about
Why are these
people
people
eating
given
cats
relevancy?
and dogs in a debate where that's completely unfounded? Like, how is this even?
I think
Our
that's the terrifying part about it, and maybe where as a society, maybe we can't fix the candidates. That maybe this is actually an ill of society. That I think in 2016, Donald Trump largely won because Democrats underestimated him. They thought he was laughable, and like, how could somebody talking this way possibly win?
Right, I'd agree.
And I think that they were stunned to find that roughly half the population was very okay with it, and that's
Yes. I think for the most, I mean, there was some things that
in
happened.
2016, there were also some aspects of Donald Trump that I greatly appreciated about his campaign. One being that he was and I didn't vote for Trump in that election, by the way, if anybody's curious. One was that he was not a party stooge, and that he wanted to drain the swamp and change the system and make it work again, instead of letting all of these outside corporate interests control everything. And I found that incredibly attractive about him.
sure.
And I think a lot of other people
It's a
did as well.
populist appeal.
Yeah,
Sure.
it's a populist, nationalist appeal. And I think nationalism is coming back in certain ways as well. And I don't particularly, there are branches of nationalism, obviously, that are not good, like Nazis and more
Like
fascist leanings of nationalism, but I think that we should be more of a nationalist or a nationally based country for right now, while we have the problems going on that are going on in the world, and the problem versus the problem. We should take care of our own problems first before we start fixing everything
I think
else.
there's a reason that there was a rise in popularity of Bernie Sanders at the same time as Donald Trump, because they were both
Outsiders.
outsiders, not part of the main political machinery, delivering populist messages that had broad base appeal, energized people that were not in the electorate before to actually come into the electorate and start voting. I think there's two sides of that coin, right?
Right.
Yeah, Bernie Sanders. I don't know if I want to go down this rabbit hole. Maybe not. But like, that's something like people's distrust in the political system. Like, I think about Bernie Sanders. I knew so many people that were like so behind Bernie Sanders, and he was making a strong push. And then everybody dropped out and supported Biden. And then Bernie just kind of
now he's a political
railroaded.
party hack, dude.
Yeah, I mean,
He's fucking.
Do you think so?
Yeah, I do.
I think
he died when he started endorsing Biden in that campaign. Politically, he turned into a party stooge.
I think when you really care about issues and really care about helping people, you quickly discover you cannot do it by yourself.
He's been trying to do
And-
it by himself for fucking 40 years.
But
though.
so I think that he's looked at this pragmatically and said, I couldn't make the grade. I couldn't get enough to make a difference. But there is power in the steam that his campaign had that still buys a lot of influence and the power to push the policy in the direction that you want. And I think that he's worked to do that first, but also realized that, okay, maybe the Democratic Party as a whole is not in line perfectly with his belief system. There's far more overlap between him and Joe Biden than with Trump.
Sure.
And so, like, if he wants to have at least a sliver of his vision of America come to fruition, you naturally ally yourself. Not everyone is a perfect ally.
Yeah.
But sometimes you say,
My question, though, is why now? I mean, he's getting older in age. He wants to leave his mark, his legacy. But he has a long strong history of opposing the Democratic Party and being much more progressive and not bowing down and kowtowing to the system like he has since 2016, I think.
Well, more 2020.
More 2020.
Because he ran again in 2020, and that was.
I would suggest that a extremely tenured senator who has always caucused with Democrats as an independent is a lot more part of the machine than you're willing to give his public image. You know, and like his public image is one thing, but like at the end of the day, if you want to get legislation passed in the Senate,
you got to make friends.
You need to have friends, and you know, sometimes it's reaching across the aisle, but sometimes it's whipping within your own caucus to make sure the votes are there. Just imagine for a moment, like the amount of energy that I went through for a really small race.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
And I'm now watching Jim Wirtz run for the state Senate. And I'm going to tell you right now, what I did is absolutely nothing in terms of work, time, effort, like an extreme amount of organizing required to run a race like that. And you're touching contacts, not just in Erie County, but all over the state or even the country.
Sure.
And each race that you go up, whether it's a governor, just the escalation in terms of what it takes to actually mount a campaign that could be successful, and then what it would take to be president. Anyone that's ever going to rise to that level of influence, to have 100-some million people say yes, or 80 million, I think was for Biden. It takes a great deal of networking power, party structure power, and money. Well, the power brings the money, but yes. But also, like, I don't know, maybe people that have been able to wield control over really diverse and fractured parties. Like, the parties aren't really truly a monolith.
Right.
In each party, you'll see there's a lot of infighting. And for somebody to like take that over and control it to the extent that they are going to be a presidential candidate, maybe that's a quality that we actually do want in a president, right?
Right.
Like, that's an organizational leader, right? The president has got to lead the administration. I understand the idea of an outsider and somebody that's not just entrenched in politics, but also there is something about that quality to be able to do that that says, well, wait a minute, maybe, you know.
Well, yeah, I mean, I get that, and I'm pretty idealistic and definitely extreme in a lot of my thoughts. But I understand that the coming together or the being able to unify and get people behind different ideas is definitely a quality that's important. And obviously, if Bernie Sanders, just for example's sake, would have had a very hard time getting any of his legislation passed without getting it passed, because the party was pretty united against his beliefs. So you need, if you actually do want anything to get done, you do need to be somewhat viable within the political system or within the political party that's available.
I think the power of the party largely comes with your ability to get elected. That when somebody has elected office, they kind of de facto have a new level of power that they didn't before, to say that, well, this person got, let's say, I think I got 6,000 votes or something like that. Okay, maybe Rock Copeland now wields the political appeal to these 6,000 people. And it's weird because nobody ever gave a shit about what I said before I ran for office, and they still barely cared what I said when I was running.
Right.
But now that I'm like elected, and then the news is like, do you want to give a statement? It's like, oh, now you guys want to hear what I have to say? I was typing stuff online for years. So I mean, there is a power in being elected. The power of Josh Shapiro is the fact that he was able to get elected to governor, and not just that, but he has the highest approval rating, and that counts for something that people go, I better listen to Josh, because if he comes down on me, there's a pretty good chance that he has the kind of power that can stamp somebody out.
Right.
You know what I mean?
So I want to go back just a little bit, just because I want to.
Sorry, I get off track.
No. You guys were all perfectly on track. It's just something that was a little bit further back that I was thinking about, but I don't want to let it go. And Shapiro reminded me of it because while he did, have his going up against Mastriano, like Mastriano was just like extremely far right, and like the tactics he used weren't necessarily like Shapiro didn't, from what I remember, like totally lean into that. So like the question in my head from like a political strategy side, even on like the county level and extrapolate it out. So like when you're watching the news, this election, at least on the presidential level, everyone's like, they're fighting for 7 states. They're not fighting for 50 states. Everyone's almost in agreement that 43 states are almost guaranteed to go one way or the other. And it's places like Erie County, it's the counties in Michigan and Wisconsin and
Ohio.
Arizona. They say Ohio's red, but like even Ohio. But like, so the question is, you talk about fighting fire with fire, but it's like they're running this election to get the moderate voters, the swing voters. So like, do you fight fire with fire and it's like, okay, these guys are exactly the same, or do you swing them by showing your integrity, like, okay, we're sick of this like low ball, hitting below the belt nonsense. Oh, they're just going to come in and do the same thing. I'm just not going to vote now, or I don't like either of them. Like, I think that there's more to like the integrity in taking the high road, and maybe I'm wrong. But the people who are going to vote for Harris are going to vote for Harris, and the people that are going to vote for Trump are going to vote for Trump. Like, the focus should be on convincing the people that aren't sure.
I think that they are, at least from the perspective of the Harris campaign, I think that there is a concerted effort to make an appeal to moderates and even older school Republicans, and you've seen whether it's a whole bunch of the staff of Ronald Reagan that just came out and endorsed her, Adam Kinzinger, who was the other big Republican that just came out and endorsed her?
People aren't thrilled about it from what I've read online, but old Dick Cheney.
Yeah, and Liz Cheney, that's who was coming to mind. Yeah. And I think a lot of that is because they have intentionally position themselves in terms of policy to say the bipartisan immigration bill, that we want to pass that. We want to see that get passed. And even though there's maybe the more progressive side of the party that's not in love with that idea, I think that there's intentional outreach to the middle there.
I think that's generally a winning policy amongst American citizens.
I agree.
Too,
I agree. I have some concerns about making sure that when we implement policies like that, that they are empathetic to people's circumstances, that we're not ruining families' lives in doing so. But yeah, I agree. I think it has a broad-based appeal, and I think unlike there's a tendency of people to say both sides, that the Democrats are becoming more liberal and the Republicans are becoming more conservative. I would say no, we're fully sorted, and this is from this Ezra Klein book again, where he's talking about it's not so much that we're polarized, that you can the issues are fairly well sorted. That like if you're talking to somebody and they are pro reproductive rights, you can probably get a pretty good idea of where they stand on a handful of other issues.
Right.
Because the issues are pretty well sorted between the parties. There was a period of time in the 50s and 60s where the most conservative Democrat from the South was far more conservative than anybody in the Republican Party. Right. And so we've kind of sorted along these issues. I'm going on and losing my train of thought. But what's happening on the Republican Party is they're offering up candidates that don't seek that center. I believe that, like Doug Mastriano, I think one of the things that he really struggled with is he said, the woke liberal media, I don't want to have them. And he would kick the press out of any of his events. And like, that they call it earned media, right? You're not having to pay for a commercial. The news is willing to put you on just because you were in town. And like, you turn that opportunity down, so like some of the things that they did in their race were non-productive, like to help them. And I think as soon as the Republican Party starts putting up more measured candidates, more people like Mitt Romney that were a palatable center, it had a very different fiscal policy, and that's when we could argue about tax rates and everything. But
Sure.
But like fairly centered people, and I'm not seeing that as much. And there can be a lot said about Kamala being a fairly progressive person. But I do think that they've been very intentional in their race to position themselves as center. And I think that would be a really indicative of where they would be on actual policy implementation. So, am I?
No, yeah, it
It makes sense.
Yeah.
I agree with you on a lot of those, that most people are pretty easily sorted when you know how they feel about Second Amendment. You can probably identify quite a few other things that they agree with. And it does seem that the Republican Party is pushing more conservative candidates that aren't really lining for that middle ground. And in certain ways, I understand that, because I think that not everyone is for everything is meant for every person. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. You find your target, you go after that target, and you hope that there's enough people in that target to push you over the edge or to get you to where you need to be. And I think that's a viable strategy. It's just unfortunate that a lot of these party candidates are so unpalatable to more progressive people. You know what I mean? Oh. They are extreme right. They are far right. They hold certain things that I would never want. And I think that they would never want, as like a whole, as a community of the United States, the global population. Like a couple big issues that like stand out to mine are legalizing weed, which most people are in favor of, and abortion.
70%.
Yeah, 70%. And same with abortion. I think it's right around 60-70% of people want at least some form of abortion within their state.
Well, and I think the hard thing is there is a symbiotic relationship between a candidate and their voters, right? Mm-hmm. A candidate does want to position themselves with policy positions that are favorable in the electorate. And you could be a little cynical about that and say, oh, they're just saying whatever they need to say to be popular. But in a weird way, that's also representative, right? Like if my population's saying we want this, well, then I better listen to them.
Yeah,
I should listen to them. But I think that like both parties are listening to their bases in primaries. And so people like Mastriano, DeSantis, the fairly savvy political people are positioning themselves in this way because it's what their base electorate's asking for. But then it's like a feedback loop, right? Where it's like now you start saying stuff about an immigrant community in Charleroi, Pennsylvania, and now your people are upset about those immigrants, and now you have to take a hardline position to. Yeah. So it's like a feedback loop a little bit,
and that's why this is such an important election cycle, because and it might not be the end of it, but I feel like if Harris gets elected, it almost puts like the death knell in the idea of like just being like over the top, like, because you follow your leader. If you see that the leader of your party is just saying outlandish things and making wild claims that don't necessarily equate to facts, but it's getting him where he needs to be, then you're more inclined to do the same thing, because you're like, okay, this is what our people like. This is what's going to keep me in a job. So, like, if there's a move in the other direction where things are more, like, amicable.
Well, I think that almost happened. In 2012, after, that was Romney's year, right? Yeah, I think.
Romney
after Romney lost, there was a lot of analysis on the Republican side, and they said, we're losing to these demographics. And one of the big ones was among Hispanics. And a lot of them looked at it and said, these should be somewhat natural allies. People from Cuba,
communist countries.
Yeah, they come from other countries where they kind of have a more conservative background because they've seen some of the things that have happened in their home countries.
Faith-based.
Yeah, faith-based, different viewpoints on abortion based on that. And so they said, we need to make some real outreach to these communities, and we need to kind of soften our stance, or maybe not soften, but reposition our stance on immigration. Maybe talk about increasing the quotas that we allow in our country legally, and do some actual reform in that area. And how do we appeal to people in that community to make sure that we bring them into our coalition, right? And the Republican Party was talking about that a lot. And then Trump came in and said, no, we're not doing that. We're going hardcore, and it worked for him. But I do think that without somebody like Trump there, who so dominates the positions that it's a death sentence if you're a Republican and you go against Trump, and your own voters would pull on you hard, right? So maybe with him checked out, maybe there's some change in positions and a change in a coalition.
A little bit more towards the middle.
Yeah.
A little bit more bipartisanship and moving across the aisle.
Yeah.
Rock, what do you think about this? When I run for president in 20 years,
better get to work.
Yeah, right.
It's going to be an issue. Answer your question, but we're
I'm proposing because I'm going to need allies, and will you sign off on my new proposition to convert America to a direct democracy? Do you know what I mean by that? Because we have the technology now to get rid of the representative democracy that we have right now. And we could do it on a national level and a state level.
And before you answer that question, and we've talked about this before, I am also planning on running in 20 years on a different platform that I've been working on called neo-tribalism. And we'll talk about that at a different time. And this is all funny, but we might be like, we're amigos, we're the best of friends, but in 20 years we might be like mega powers explode.
Yeah,
this is like Macho Man versus Hulk Hogan in 1989.
I thought you were gonna have a proposition too, and we're gonna make Rock decide.
If we're talking about online voting on
direct democracy,
every issue, like a bill's proposed and everybody in the country votes on it, I hate to sound elitist because I generally don't regard myself as an elitist person. Yeah, it's really surprised me sometimes that my baseline thought process, the first instinct that I have, is very often wrong. One issue this year where it's already happened a couple years ago when LRTA was a big topic of conversation, I really had an unfavorable view of it. It seemed to me that only rich people really saw the benefits of LRTA. That you had to have...
What's the acronym stand for?
Economic revitalization. Don't make me.
No, it's okay.
Remember
I'm
the
just trying to
whole
get an
damn
explanation of what LERTA
so what
is.
LERTA is basically, let's say you have a house that's worth $100,000 and you renovate it, and now it's going to be appraised at $150,000. You would expect your taxes to go up, right?
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes you don't do that renovation because you don't want to have your taxes go up. What LERTA does is says for 10 years, when you get your building permit and you check that box that you're applying for LERTA, that means that for 10 years, you will pay the taxes that you originally did. So even though your appraisal goes up to $150,000, your taxes won't go up for 10 years.
Okay.
Now here's the rub, though. It's a pretty good program because it gives you an incentive to revitalize blighted properties. It gives you a lot of incentives to have renewal in the city. But the problem is you have to have that money from the get-go, right? Mm-hmm. And I don't know about you, but like I don't have 50 grand laying around to reinvest into my property.
Nah.
And so it tends to be not helping every economic group. So to me, initially, I really didn't like it because it was like, why are we giving up revenue from
people
the
that
rich,
have $50,000 to invest back into a property?
Right. And so I had an antithetical point of view on that. And after I got elected, it opened up a lot of conversations with a lot of different people with actual professional economic development background, actual people that are doing these projects, and you see $500 million of upcoming investment coming into the city, and people that you really respect and know that they know what the hell they're talking about, and they say, no, this is really important for us to keep this going, that it isn't just helping rich people. It's a lot of people that get $10,000 of siding and improve the facade of their home, and there's a lot of residential LERTA permits, and I really flipped on it. And I became one of the biggest advocates for it. I was calling the city councilman and the school board and trying to advocate passage. I was trying really hard to push that through county council, and we just did pass it.
Congratulations. Nice work.
Woo! Thank you. And I think that there's more that we should do.
Right.
But all I would say is not everyone is always a subject matter expert.
Sure.
And I think in some ways that's why we elect representatives. Mm-hmm. Because I don't
want to be a subject expert on everything, or can it be expected to be?
Right. And so I as a voter, and they're going to propose some new tax package, and now I got to read through 900 pages of a bill.
No one's going
to
do
I need to
that.
consult with some lawyers to know about the legality of it. I need to consult with some economic experts to tell me how it's going to affect the population, for me to make that informed decision. Mm-hmm. And I don't know. I don't have the time to do that,
Right.
And I think that we should elect people with a good ethic, somebody whose morals align with our own, so that they can do that. That's their job, that they consult with experts in different fields.
Sure.
What I would say is direct democracy for presidential elections should happen post haste. The Electoral College is a bag of shit.
Right.
There are a lot of reforms that we could have, like ranked choice voting, which would really carve up what we know as the two parties and really have a diversity of viewpoints and real options on the ballot. There are things that we can do in our democracy to have reform right now. Mm-hmm. There's barely a political will to keep the government open right now.
Right.
So having those kind of big, broad-based reforms is probably not going to happen today, but I do see it catching on. You have ranked choice voting in Maine, in Alaska. They just implemented it, and they just sent their first congressperson as a Democrat for like 40 years because of ranked choice voting.
Good for them.
Yeah, and it changes what your representation looks like, and I think it can be more
diverse.
Yeah, diverse, and like, hey, wouldn't it be nice if let's say 75% of the time, a Green Party candidate and a Democratic candidate align with your point of view? I don't vote Green because I know Jill
They're
Stein
not
has
gonna-
no opportunity at all. But in a ranked choice system where that they do have an opportunity to win,
Yeah.
that really changes the dynamic
Makes
a lot.
that vote viable.
Yeah, and you see it in other countries that have democracies.
Lots of other countries.
Yeah, and it doesn't, and that's not even to say reform in the Senate, which should happen someday, because it's terrible that a person in Wyoming's vote counts way more than a person in California. Like, there's all kinds of reforms, but even leaving our Constitution as is and just providing for ranked choice voting would revolutionize our options available to us.
Mm-hmm.
So for the
No, go ahead. I was going to talk about third party and how devastated I was that Tulsi Gabbard and RFK both joined the Trump campaign for a minute, but that's
Doesn't
not really
that make you wonder if they were ever not part of that?
part of the Democratic Party.
No, I think that
He bought and paid for him.
I think that there is. Well, I'll say it this way: in Florida, it's been uncovered. I can't remember what race it was, where a Republican candidate basically put up somebody else to run in an effort to pull votes away from their opponent, and I believe that was always RFK's intention.
well, I do want to make the point I was going to bring up. But
What
I'll
about
stay on
Tulsi
this.
though?
What about Cornel West? They're not letting him be on a ballot
Anywhere.
Well,
most anywhere. There's
there, and I can't speak much to the state by state cases, but I mean there are qualifications that one has to have a certain number of signatures and
Sure.
a certain number of districts and a certain amount of counties, and I can't remember all the rules because I'm never going to run for president.
They're different in every state.
And so
too.
if you don't meet the base qualifications to be on the ballot, you don't get to be on the ballot.
right.
And maybe that sucks. But if you can't manage the base qualifications to get on the ballot in 50 states, you might not have the qualifications to be the president.
Well, I think that it's a self-defeating system a little bit because they're not afforded the resources that the Democrat and Republican parties are to get the campaign funds out there, which in turn
100%.
disallows them to be part of the debates too. Like if you had the third or fourth choice on national TV debating, they'd probably generate some more money. They'd generate more buzz.
More votes.
100%. I mean, why we organize in the parties is to have organizational allies, to know that when you are in a presidential campaign and you appear to be winning, you get a lot more resources, right? Because there's already an infrastructure built. And yes, it is a barrier. But, I mean, Ross Perot was at one time a candidate with, I think, around 34% of votes and was able to qualify to get on quite a few states and then pulled off the ballot and then went back on the ballot. It is something that is physically possible. You just have to be... It's inherently more difficult because you don't have that base organizing power.
Right.
Ross Perot was a billionaire,
Right.
Yeah, so it was a little easier for
I don't-
him.
I
Kennedy
don't think
families
that,
aren't poor either.
Yeah, I
they-
don't think many people that are making $40,000 a year are ever going to make a considerable run at the presidency. It is an inherently
Expensive.
expensive endeavor.
I want to go back to your idea that RFK was a political pawn or subject to pull votes away from a party.
That's my belief.
I think he was a little. I could see that, and I understand and respect that thought, but I think that he was pulling from both parties too much for that to really be viable.
And actually, I think that was the problem.
Yeah.
And why he eventually pulled is that polling consistently showed in a three-way race that he was pulling more from Donald Trump than he was from Joe Biden. And then when Kamala got in, and that really upset the apple cart in terms of who was being hurt by what support getting pulled. That's my belief.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I can't prove that. And I'm just lowly minion in
But
all of it.
I feel you. I think he was so far, and maybe that was part of the whole plan, was for him to be such a far outlier and to be so progressive to draw those votes from the Democratic Party, and seeing that it was attracting other people as well. I mean, that adds up and makes sense. But then where does Tulsi Gabbard fall into this?
Also, real quick, Kennedy.
I have a lot of thoughts on Tulsi. And
Kennedy.
I don't want to get in an argument.
Kennedy definitely, before he backed out and supported Trump, very publicly was like, hey, Harris campaign, if you give me a cushy seat in your cabinet, then I will endorse you. That's why he came out, and like, if they didn't do it, but he was like a bought and sold type. If they would have been like, yeah, you can.
If either party would have given him a cabinet position, he would have endorsed that candidate.
That's quite possible. And I remember having a conversation with someone after I lost, and they were talking about, hey, this is actually not the worst thing, that there's an inherent amount of power of having even been a candidate, because people will go, oh, this person's checked in, they care, that they're working hard, and so you get noticed. And that's why Pete Buttigieg is the transportation secretary, because holy cow, they were knocking it out of the park as the presidential candidate. This is something that we should probably bring on board. And so it is possible that he was in it for the relevancy all along, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe a presidential campaign unlocks doors for you to do other things. It does appear that he was shopping an endorsement to the Harris campaign for some sort of seat, which I think it's a good thing they said no. Makes me question even more why he's on board with Trump, right? Like, clearly there's a quid pro quo there of some sort. That's possible too.
I mean, the Kennedy name, or at least political pull, just sure isn't what it used to be.
Well, I think
it was a pretty good poll. Like he had a big.
Did
following.
He ever get over single digits? He was like at what, 4 or 5% maybe.
I thought he was around like 10.
Okay,
for a while.
I mean, compared to his father before he was assassinated, and his
Robert
uncle,
Kennedy Sr. was one of the greatest Americans that ever lived.
Yeah, Robert Kennedy would have been the president if they didn't kill him. I've watched documentaries on that where he was going into places like rural West Virginia, Kentucky, and just talking to people as the presidential candidate, and they were like, this guy is fucking great.
There's a great picture of him, and I think it was in West Virginia, where he's like walking through like a coal mining town, and with like shacks and like a whole bunch of kids with their mother on the porch, and he's standing there talking to her. It's a really cool picture because he really was doing that.
He was a man of the people. And ladies and gentlemen, in the year 2044, that is what I will be. Okay.
When you run for president.
And now
retail politics.
Now, hear me out. You've seen the movie Mad Max. Everybody, not everybody, but a lot of people like it. But it's going to be like Mad Max with less violence, more green space, less pollution.
But cool cars.
We're going vertical.
I'm on board with this.
We're going vertical with our cities. It's going to be incredibly expensive. But we are going to have so much green space, people.
We just watched Mad Max over the weekend.
I thought it was pretty good. I liked it.
You brought that up.
I know how to connect with the people. I'm not for the direct democracy. That'll be the big thing we debate amongst.
It's okay, because actually me and Dave have a secret plan the whole time, is that I'm his dark shadow in the background that's really controlling his presidential campaign.
He's the NSA.
I'm the deep state.
He's the deep state.
Are you going to be you running as the spoiler?
I'm the deep state,
yeah. We're talking about it so openly because nobody's going to believe it, but you just wait 20 years.
How are we doing for time, real quick?
Oh, we're good. We can end anytime. You gotta get out here.
The deep state thing is really interesting.
Yeah.
Because I mean, you are the deep state.
I'm the deep state in Dave's campaign.
You are one of the people that make our government work.
You think so?
I mean, that's what the deep state is the bureaucratic positions that make the day-to-day work get done.
Yeah, I guess I am deep state.
And I think it's really interesting that like keeps coming up, and they're like the deep state, and it's like, what are you talking about? Bob that's sitting at his desk at some IRS
computer,
office that's like just filing the forms, and like, I don't know, it's an interesting topic because there's like this narrative around like, oh, the deep state. And one of the interesting things I've been finding with working for the county is, obviously I'm pretty antithetical to Davis and his belief system. But as I'm talking with the directors and the
deep state
there,
works fucking hard.
And I realize I'm like, hey, you know what? I need to not necessarily go after this person because they're just actually just doing their job as hard as they can and working their butt off. And we need the deep state. I mean,
yeah. I think the way that most of the people think of the deep state, though, is really the corporate donors and the corporate class. And
is that what you think they're talking about?
I think that's what most citizens think of when they think of the deep state,
or
more than the bureaucratic people in the offices that are filing the paperwork and sending the money around and making sure that it meets the criteria and follows all the rules and regulations.
Or like the CIA.
Yeah, like in here with like the FBI and the DOJ and like the deep state doesn't
and
want.
And
it turns out
military-industrial complex.
And it turns out like most of the people at the FBI are just happening to try to catch criminals and
do their job.
It just so happens that like the people that they're going after are criminals.
Generally people that are doing bad stuff out there.
Like,
surprise.
Yeah. Oh, the deep state's after Donald Trump. Well, yeah, actually, kind of. This might be their job.
I mean, he is a felon. He's broken some laws. Like, yeah, they probably would be well within their rights of doing their jobs to investigate the different people that are doing things that they shouldn't be doing.
Thank God I'm just the trustworthy face of this campaign.
Right. It's a good move.
You're backed by the deep state.
I'm backed by the deep state, but I am not the deep state, and I will fight the deep state for you.
While I have the support of the deep state.
Right. That's the way it goes, though. I feel like that's how how politics are really like operated so many times. Like, there was a really good piece that I saw on YouTube about, I don't know if I talked with you about this online or talked with different people about it before, but there was a really interesting piece from Chris Como, who's on a new news station that I can't remember what it's called now, but I guess they're going to be getting nationally syndicated 24-hour news station. Anyway, he was at the Democratic National Convention, and he goes on this little, probably 3 or 4 minute tirade about how at the Democratic National Convention, all of these politics are saying, we're getting corporations out of politics. We're going after the price gouging. We're going after all of these people that are causing inflation and greedflation and all these things at the Democratic National Convention, while at the same time, every corporate box in this giant arena that costs millions of dollars is all bought and paid for by these corporate donors. So while they are taking millions and millions of dollars from these people, they are publicly stating that they are going after these very same people because they are the problem. And to me, that is incredibly, it's talking out of both sides of your mouth. You know what I mean? And I thought that was very interesting the way he put it into words, because he had it was a very good little tirade. I appreciated it a lot, and he had charts and graphs and stuff like that. And at first, I thought it was like a MSNBC or a CNN or some major big news, major media, mainstream media corporation. I'm like, how does this fucking dude still have a job? That was my first thought, is how he's going to get fired for saying this type of shit.
Well, Chris Cuomo and his brother have a lot of grievances with the Democratic Party after being booted from relevancy because of their
his brother
behavior.
is in jail, though, or
yeah.
what?
Is he in?
I don't know if he's in jail, but I know he had quite a
had
number of charges and investigations going on.
Big trouble, and Chris was in trouble for helping cover for him. But yeah, and you bring up a valid point though, because it is a challenge because companies are a duality of at one time being the potential for some sort of corruption, but also employ people. And like we need jobs, right? So like there's a really fine line to walk there in terms of who you bring on as allies and what good or maybe not good that they're bringing to communities. And like Erie Insurance is one of the largest employers in town.
Yeah,
and
them in Hammond, I believe.
There's a lot of conversations that happen about the extent to which they should or shouldn't have influence on policy, different things. I mean, it's a challenge to walk a line there. And Gannon, I think, is a good example because I was very against the lease at the library. But when there was $2.5 million of what they call RCAP grants coming from the state, from the governor, hand-selected by Governor Shapiro, but they come to us to get approved for letting our people administer it. And I told the president there, I says, hey, excited to see there's this RCAP funds coming. He goes, oh, are you going to fight it? And I'm like, no, I'm not going to fight it. Like, why would I tell the governor that we don't want his money in Erie County?
Right.
Of course we want, like, that's a terrible move to say, no, don't send us money because they barely send us enough as it is. And so I think it's one of those things of supporting corporations when they do well and being willing to slap the hand when they're not.
Exactly.
And I think that's the line that you kind of have to walk. And so like you won't see a lot of oil and gas producers at dem functions because a lot of us are slapping their hands for the environmental impacts that they have. And when they do good and they diversify into solar and wind and like, yay,
Hydro,
cool, we'll help you do that.
Right.
So that there's a fine line there of how to deal with that.
Yeah.
You just gotta have people that are actually willing to slap their hands and not just go along with everything. I believe it's called lobbying. That I'm sure that happens more on like the federal level, but that's one of the things that creates the deepest sense of distrust from the citizens to the government.
There's two more things I want to bring up, and then we can call it a night as long as you got another 10, 15 minutes.
Yeah, whatever.
The first, and they kind of go hand in hand. The first, well, maybe not. Since we were just talking about this, I do want to talk about how the Supreme Court just basically legalized bribery post act being done. And I think that in itself is hugely problematic. Hugely
Do I get
problematic.
tipped for this, by the way?
Yeah. We'll give you all of our revenue from...
you could be tipped.
Yes. Yeah.
You gotta have one
hugely
of those.
problematic.
We actually paid Rock to show up today and to say the words that he's saying because that's legal now. Well, we aren't allowed to pay him till afterwards. So we have to decide whether or not we like what you have to say or what you're going to do, and then we can pay you.
It's horribly problematic. It's by all appearances, our Supreme Court right now has a majority of people that are okay with anything that is politically beneficial to them at the moment. And which is a weird thing for a lifetime appointment. Like, you're a lifetime appointment. You don't have to worry about keeping anybody happy. There's no,
you can't really get kicked out.
You're not really going to get kicked out. And so, like, that should give the court some independence. But it appears that they are co-opted to the extent that they're willing to say that the president can't break laws. Well, that doesn't make any sense. How is the person charged with faithfully executing the law not subject to it?
Right.
Yeah,
it's a major problem.
Crazy. Our Supreme Court is fucking wild right now. And the other thing that I just wanted to touch on was
That's my hometown, by the way.
Washington, D.C.?
No, that court case.
Oh, okay. In Ohio?
Chesterton, Indiana.
Indiana. Okay.
Where one of my best friends lives in Chesterton. That was the city that went to the Supreme Court because the guy took a bribe and they somehow convinced them that it was just a tip and that's okay.
Right. Insane. Absolutely insane. And the other thing was Warren Buffett's recent statement about funding the government entirely through billionaires being taxed appropriately. And I thought that was a really interesting statement. And I believe there was some sort of coalition going on throughout Europe that was also struck down, or like internationally a coalition or some sort of movement towards having a global cartel, almost cartel-like tax based around billionaires, so they wouldn't just dodge that billionaire tax by moving to a different country or living in a different place. And I believe that it was getting traction for a little bit, but for some reason was moved away. And I wanted to see if you had any thoughts about the billionaire class and them being taxed appropriately and us not having to pay taxes anymore based on the revenue that would be generated through people like Warren Buffett and Bill Gates and Elon Musk and everybody else out there that has more money than
The Waltons.
they frankly know what to do with.
It is an unfortunate reality that's, well, the saying is the only thing that's sure in life is death and taxes.
Right.
And for good reason. I mean, like, taxes are what allow our society to function, right? If the city no longer paved roads, do you think that the private market would come along and start building roads? Probably not. You know,
Not unless they were to their factories or their stores.
Exactly, and they're not going to your home. And so, like, there are functions of government in which only the government is well armed to do things. Like when we're talking about the Presque Isle Gateway, a lot of people are really upset about how much money was paid for those properties, and it's like, hey, the private market wasn't going to redevelop these properties. We need to do something as the government to make this palatable for the private market. So,
Right.
So,
And now they're being sold,
yeah.
which is what should happen.
Right. And so, like, there are some functions that only the government is well equipped to do. So, and that requires taxes. And I don't think, even if we took every dime from a billionaire, which I don't think would be fair, I think it's okay to let people get ahead in life.
Sure.
Maybe just not to grotesque levels without paying their fair share. And I think that should we tax billionaires at a higher rate than a family of four living on $40,000 a year? Yes, absolutely. I don't think that we'll ever get to the point where everybody just... Warren Buffett gave us all of his money, so now we don't need it anymore. Well, it turns out
Warren
money
Buffett
gets spent, and you need more after that. And
Sure.
You eventually run out of billionaires. So I don't think that is viable, but they should pay at a much higher rate than they do now. Most billionaires hold the vast amount of their wealth in investments that they're getting 15% capital gains tax on. That is disgusting compared to the amount that gets taken out of your paycheck every year, you know. And there should be something for, and actually there's a Harris policy in place to say, right now they only get taxed on realized gains. And I can't remember the stats, but it's something like if you have over $100 million and X amount of stocks and whatever, that they're going to start taxing some of that.
And realized gains
income.
means they actually sold the stocks. They're
Yeah,
not just-
realized gains is that they've sold the stock at a higher price and made a profit.
Right.
And now this is saying, hey, rather than letting you hold $100 billion in the stock market in perpetuity and do things like buy Twitter with the collateral of your stocks, like if you can buy something with your stocks but not actually give them up, it seems like that is an asset that's taxable.
Right.
Yeah, that should probably happen. That was the guy from what's that? The Daily Show was talking about
Jon
that.
Stewart.
Jon Stewart.
No, the former guy. He's doing stand up now.
Trevor Noah.
Trevor Noah. He was talking about that, and I listened to him talk about that. I was like, that is exactly right. He was talking about Elon Musk bought Twitter with stock, but he didn't have to give it up.
Right.
And he got to keep it because then he used it as collateral with somebody else to bring on debt. Is wild. So yeah, the billionaire class should pay more. I don't know if we should take it all away.
I don't think we should take it all away either, but I do think that there comes a point of wealth where nobody needs that money.
I just find it interesting. We're talking about taxes and stuff. I just always find it interesting. I talk to people that like the countries that generally poll as like the happiest people on the face of this earth are usually like the Scandinavian countries, the Norways, the Swedens. They have universal health care, massive social programs, safety nets. They pay a lot more in taxes than we do.
They also have
And they also have some of the tightest immigration policies in the whole entire world. And apparently that's the recipe for success.
they also nationalized their fuel production.
I would
in
push
Norway
back on
and
the
Sweden.
immigration just because as a member of the EU, they technically have not open borders, but free travel from country to country in Europe. But yes, it's hard if you're not a EU citizen.
Oh, I know.
to
I
get
looked
it.
into it because I was like, wow, these people are happy. I want to go live there. And it was like, good fucking luck, dude. Like,
Yeah.
No, unless you're well, you could probably get in because you have a degree.
yeah, but yeah, you got to have like a transferable skill that they want. And it's still
Same thing
like
with
a.
Canada.
Yeah, same with
hard to
Canada.
get
Canada,
into
Japan, most
Which
first world countries.
Also, I'm not trying to turn this into a comedy spiel. I'm being 100% honest. Any Norwegian women out there, I'm single.
yes,
You know what I'm saying?
your mail order husband.
Your mail order husband is willing and ready to come to Norway.
A conservative colleague of mine was talking about spending some time in Germany, and it's just going on and on about how great it is. Their roads are all perfect, and like there's no dirt roads in the rural areas. It's all really nice paved roads, and it's like it kind of sounds like you're advocating for their tax policy because like we could do that.
Right.
We could actually have nice roads. These interstates that are crumbling, the bridges that are crumbling. At one time, we made an incredible investment in the 50s to build all of them because they never existed before that.
Yeah.
Like we could actually do that. That was when the top tax rate was like 90%.
That was a
And Dwight
great New Deal, right?
That was
Eisenhower, who was a Republican president.
Yes, he was.
And he
damn good
created
one.
the interstate system.
Desegregated the military.
Yeah.
He did a lot
And
of good things.
warned everybody about the military-industrial complex.
He did do that.
All of that stuff.
You'd think that more people would have listened to him. Like this general that was like the leader, like
World War
probably
II.
won World
Yeah.
War II, like probably knows something about
Right.
the military.
What's going on here?
That should have been like a, wait, what?
Yeah. But instead we have forever wars and
We have no wars right now. That we have no people in active combat roles.
We have no people in active combat.
in another foreign country.
which is good. And I approve. I it's hard for me to say that we're not involved in wars though.
I mean, proxies, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're very involved in proxies.
We are very involved in proxies.
But I'm without getting into too much trouble, I'm somewhat I'd rather not get directly entangled.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would rather directly not get entangled as well with either of the proxy wars. I can say it. And
Wow, one of those is really, really, really important to our national security.
I think that, and maybe I'm a communist, maybe I'm a Putin sympathizer, but I think that we could end that war very simply. And instead of making war, we actually make peace with someone that has been wanting to make peace with us by allowing them to join NATO. Because we don't let our friends... We don't make peace with our friends, we make peace with our enemies. And in order to make peace with our enemies, we invite them into our giant national peace treaties.
It sounded like a Beatles song or something. And go back to the 60s peace and
Because
love.
that's kind of how that whole situation started popping off, was we wanted to join more people to join NATO and to increase our area and move missiles and all that stuff against the people that by the people I mean Russia, that want to join NATO that have been denied access to NATO for however long they've been denied access or wanting to join NATO, that we've said no. So
I think that we might have a differing point of view, but I'm also comfortable saying that I'm not deeply entrenched in international relations, and that I'm comfortable saying that I don't know very much about it. My understanding is the arrangement that we have currently in Ukraine is largely to prevent future expansionism, which we as a people have seen a lot of history of in World War II, especially.
World War II and World War I, yeah.
And that we learned that giving to a dictator, giving up territories as concessions to appease them, we kind of learned that appeasement doesn't really work.
I mean, that's the whole Cold War.
I think that that's a relevant argument, but I would also say that the encroachment into Ukraine was largely based off of threats that they felt for us wanting Ukraine to join NATO and us giving Russia the cold shoulder. And I think that, and maybe I am a communist or a Putin sympathizer, but
see, those aren't even the same thing.
Yeah.
He's not a communist.
He's not a communist. I'm a dictator sympathizer. Or a authoritarian ruler sympathizer.
I was going to say we
I
gave
agree
them
to disagree on that topic.
I was going to say we gave them the cold shoulder, no pun intended. You know what I'm
Cold
saying?
shoulder, Cold War, boom, all the time. But
I'm staying out of this one.
and as far as Israel goes, I think Israel needs to take
You
care
got me
of
on
Israel.
record on quite a few topics. I'm not gonna
Not going to touch Israel.
One.
I'll touch Israel because I am Jewish, and I think that Israel and Palestine to me is such a fucking mess, and it's always going to be a mess until it's not a mess. And people wonder or say that Palestine is acting cruelly on October, whenever the fuck it was, or November. And that's what started this whole thing off. But Israel has a long and torrid history of abusing and racism and genocide towards Palestine. And of course that when you treat people the way that Palestine has been treated, they are going to react radically when you're put in a cage for so long. But
the only thing I'll say on that topic is the challenging thing about that issue is there is not a point of view that you could express in which you're not accused of being some sort of extremist on either side. Obama talked about it on a podcast, actually, and said it far better than I ever could, but basically explained that it's quite possible that everyone is wrong. And in a situation where everyone has committed extreme
atrocities,
wrongdoing and atrocities, that there might not be a right answer. Mm-hmm. And he talked about acknowledging that it's true that the way that Israel was created might have caused issues, the way that the 7 Days War went, it created issues, and each moment in time on all sides for all participants, including the United States, everyone has made some quite horrible mistakes, and for at least some time in the future,
it's going to be fucked up.
Sounds like that will be the path. I was surprised.
I completely agree.
I would like to understand how pagers randomly explode. I mean, not randomly. They were
blew off a bunch of people's hips. I don't think they obviously those don't randomly explode. I think that there was a lot of Mossad activity to figure out.
That's wild.
That little plan and what they were doing with pagers.
Phones. Like, is this a bomb?
Yeah. Well, I think they knew beforehand where they were that they were doing this and that they were buying massive amounts of pagers, and they just found out where they were getting their pagers pumped and put a nice little explosive device in there and blew a bunch of people's arms and legs off in crowded areas, because that's
Bonkers.
the way that things seem to happen in that area. But Rocky, I've taken up a long period of time. Anybody who lasted this long and is still listening, y'all are champions. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to the next time you come on the show. Thank you for representing us in county council until I become president and start my direct democracy with everybody. But this has been fun, man. It's always a good time.
Can I say too?
Yeah.
Lately, my calendar has been absurdly crowded, and there's been a lot of meetings that are not always super eager to go to. But thank you for the opportunity to come back, and it's nice to spend some time with some friends. And
Yeah, no doubt.
just hang out.
Absolutely. Thanks
Appreciate
for coming and making some time.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
thanks for fitting us into your schedule, Rock. Vote for Rock next time when he's in re-election for county council.
I got a
You've
long
already
time
started.
before I think about that.
We're not letting you leave county council now, so you're stuck there forever or until you move
12
to a
years
bigger
max.
position. Yeah. But other than that, we love you guys. Peace out. Have a great night.